Hey everyone, Pants here from the Skeptaholics podcast. Before we get started today, I just want to run through our socials here really quick to let you know where you can find us to keep up with the content. You can find us on Facebook at the Skeptaholics podcast. You can find us on Twitter at Skeptaholics, and you can find us on TikTok at Skeptaholics podcast. Find and download the podcast on Google Podcasts, Apple Music, Spotify, Podbean, Amazon Music, Pandora, TuneIn, iHeartRadio, and anywhere else you can find your favorite podcasts. You can even tell your Alexa-enabled device, "Hey Alexa, play the Skeptaholics podcast." Guys, liking and following on all of our social media accounts is the best way to help us out. So give us a like, give us a follow, and share with your friends. Thanks for tuning in, and enjoy the show.
Welcome to the Skeptaholics podcast, your source for all things conspiracy, true crime, unexplained, and unsolved. All we ask is that you keep an open mind and always question everything.
So, welcome back, guys. Good to have us on board for another episode. Took a little longer to get out than planned, but we're finally here. Here with Jamie. How are you doing?
What's up, everybody? I'm glad to be back.
And
Glad to be doing this.
And we have a new member of the podcast for you joining us today. Jake, how's it going?
Yeah, not too bad. Good to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. So, for those of you who don't know, who didn't keep up on the social media, who don't follow us over there, Billy had to back out for some personal reasons. He had gotten a promotion at work, and it's going to take up way too much of his time for him to be able to continue doing the podcast with us. So, he had to make a gracious exit, kind of short notice. We don't hold that against him.
No, we're happy for him.
He had to step into his position right away, and we were unable to do the podcast that we're bringing you this week back before Christmas. One of the other things that held us up is Jamie had moved and didn't have internet yet. But while we were on hiatus, we did work to find a replacement member. Jake, why don't you take a few minutes, tell us a little bit about yourself, tell the listeners a little bit about yourself.
My name is Jake. Been studying metaphysics and lots of conspiracy for the past about 15 years. Hopefully I can be a good fit for this podcast. It's kind of right up my alley, so it seems. So really excited to just get going here, I guess.
Yeah. So
Paul's excited that Jake is now the elder statesman of the podcast also. So.
Yeah, about 10 years, I think.
About.
Yeah. 10 years of falling down rabbit holes.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes,
right?
I got some catching up to do.
Yep. 10 years of more information for the listeners.
Yes. And well, that was one thing I kind of joked with Jamie about when we talked about bringing you on is, I mean, the little bit we've talked about a lot of different conspiracies, you're like a fucking encyclopedia of knowledge when it comes to conspiracies. It blows my mind how much information you can retain. You're like a fucking sponge. So,
well, yeah, that's what happens when you listen to it, you dive into it, and you actually follow the history of it. Then you ask questions, read books, do more research, and you see the dots connect. You know, there are so many things. I mean, you know, as far as conspiracy theory goes, you know, about the cabal that rules the world and blah, blah, blah. Well, how did they become? What do they do? Who are they? Who are they presently? Who are they in the past? So it's a long study, I guess. And you actually, it's one of those things that you really have to want to do it. You know, if you just research one topic, okay, yeah, you get that, blah, blah. But when you see how it falls into the bigger picture of things, And you realize that, life is a big matrix, like a giant chess game that people play. It's, to me, it makes life more and more interesting to see how the pieces, not that there is pieces, but how each piece moves, why each piece moves, how it gets moved.
Yeah.
And I know I'm talking in real generalities here, but it's captivated my interest for literal decades now. So I'm really excited to get into this stuff with you guys.
Good.
It almost makes me wonder how you have like the wherewithal to walk and chew gum at the same time, because like I just don't understand how there's that much room for information in there. Like I just don't. I'm kind of a simple guy, so like I don't think I'd be able to like remember how to breathe if I had all that information.
Well,
Yes.
well, I tell you what, finding some of this stuff out has made it, hard to sleep at night. I know that.
Yeah, I can imagine.
But
I mean, all it takes for Jamie is a massive octopus that can be in fresh water. So
That's in the past. We're not bringing that up.
but a lot of what's actually helped me sleep at night with all this information is just spiritual studies. My personal development has gone hand in hand with this. As far as understanding myself, you understand yourself, you understand the world. Going back to like Hermetic principles, as above, so below, as within, so without. We definitely create our own realities.
yeah.
And we can get into that later. That's a long story, but
Yeah, we can do a whole episode on it.
Sweet.
So, well, for the listeners, we already kind of know what we're doing, but we're going to bring you an episode tonight on the Georgia Guidestones. So, why don't you go ahead, Jamie, and kick us off with a little bit of the history of the Georgia Guidestones?
All right, so just a brief history here. I don't want to get into too much and cross over too much because I feel like Jake and Paul are going to have some good information for you guys. But what I have here is that in June of 1979, a man using the pseudonym R.C. Christian approached the Alberton Granite Finishing Company on behalf of a small group of loyal Americans. And that's in quotations, by the way. And he went to them and he wanted this structure to be built, and he wanted to commission a structure. He explained that the stones would function as a compass, a calendar, and a clock, and they should be capable of withstanding catastrophic events. So, I mean, he was willing to pay top dollar, as I'll get to in a minute here, to have some high quality pieces made. And so Joe at Alberton Granite assumed that Christian was, in quotes, a nut, and attempted to discourage him by promoting a quote for the commission that was several times higher than any project the company had previously taken. I don't know if either of you guys know. Do you either of you guys know what the quote was, like what the dollar amount was? I couldn't find anything.
From what I recall in watching different documentaries on this throughout the years, it was something. Now we're talking 1979, 1980, so
Yeah.
late 70s, early 80s. It was somewhere in the neighborhood of about $250,000. It was like $190,000 or $200,000, I believe, was the actual quote, but it's right in that neighborhood of $250,000.
Which, I mean, that's a lot of money back then, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know what the conversion is at off the top of my head.
Yeah.
I guess I'm looking here.
Probably somewhere around $400,000, I would think.
According to in23dollars.com, which who fuck knows what that is, $250,000 in 1980 is equivalent to the purchasing power of $790,000 today.
Wow.
I don't know how accurate that is, but either way, I mean, you get it. That's 250 today is a lot of money, let alone almost 800,000. So he provided him with the quote for, let's just say, $250,000, and thinking he would basically the guy would be like, all right, yeah, I'm not paying that. But to Joe's surprise, RC Christian accepted the quote just without even bartering at all, it sounds like. And when they talked about how he was going to pay, RC Christian said that he represented a group which had been planning the Guidestones for about 20 years, and they all wanted to remain anonymous. So Christian gave the Granite Company a scale model of the Guidestones and 10 pages of specifications. On top of that, RC Christian's group also purchased 5 acres of land a little like 3 months after he went in for the first time to talk to the Granite Company. And it is in northern Georgia. I believe it's right outside of Athens, I think. I don't have that here, but from remembering, I think it's outside of Athens somewhere. And he purchased 5 acres of land from a farmer. So just kind of a field up on a hill. On March 22nd, 1980, the monument was unveiled before an audience described as anywhere between 100 and 400 people. So it sounds like they kind of kept it under wraps because they did want to be anonymous. And RC Christian later transferred ownership of the land and the Guidestones to Elbert County, which is the county that it was built in. So I guess I don't want to get too far in more than that, because I feel like some of the information should be delivered by you guys. So that's kind of the history of it leading up to the creation of the Guidestones.
Now, the draw of these Guidestones, or the mystery behind them, is what's written on them.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, it's kind of more like not as much like how they were created. I mean, it's pretty straightforward, right? Like a Granite Company did them. It's just kind of more like what they say and why they say it. For, kind of from what I gathered.
And this is what's really behind the mystery of it, as what they say leads way into the why, because, you start off with maintain humanity under 500 million and perpetual balance with nature. That's the biggest one that sets off conspiracy theorists.
Yeah.
And that think, they're wanting to take the world's population down from, what is it now, like 7 billion, down to 500 million. Right. Why would they do that? Guide reproduction wisely, improve fitness and diversity. So, you look at these and it's like, all right, now they want to control reproduction. It gets very conspiratorial in this. And this is written in 8 different languages. So, they go on here, unite humanity in a new living language, rule passion, faith, tradition, and all things with tempered reason. Just in that one, the word rule, faith, rule passion, rule. Wait a minute. What are they talking about here?
Yeah.
Protect the people of the nations with fair laws and just courts. Let the nations rule internally, resolving external disputes in a world court. Avoid petty laws and useless officials. Balance personal rights with social duties. Prize truth, beauty, love. Seek harmony with the infinite. Be not a cancer on the earth. Leave room for nature. All these things, it's really up to the personal interpretation of what they're saying. Another interesting fact is the holes that are drilled in this. They wanted it, as a clock, as a astronomical clock, and these holes are all drilled. One hole looks at Polaris, one is, east west, sunrise, sunset. So you can really tell, where you are in the year, in the day, just by, if astrologically where everything's supposed to be during the time of year. This thing is extremely functional as far as that's concerned.
Yeah, I mean, even like when I look at it, when I look at those commandments, shall we say, with broad strokes, I mean, to me, that a lot of them don't sound that bad. I mean, a lot of them sound like, maybe we should be doing this stuff to begin with, like not being a cancer to the earth and leaving room for nature and, things like that. But then there is a few of them, like you had said, about ruling and population control, essentially, that kind of makes you pause and go like, oh shit, how do they plan on doing that?
Right.
Yeah.
And it's, I think, the name of them, Guidestones. I don't think these are actual, a plan like a lot of conspiracy theorists think. They're guides. They're guide rules. If there
Mhm.
was to be some type of catastrophe on the earth, it had to be repopulated, and here's how you do it in 8 different languages.
Yeah.
Here's how you do it, and it'll create a more fair, just world.
When they were commissioned in 1979, that was at the height of the Cold War, right?
Yes.
So I mean, or I maybe not quite the height, but it was still at the forefront of everybody's mind. So I mean, maybe it was just commissioned for that because they were planning for nuclear catastrophe.
Yeah.
Could very well
Yeah.
be.
And that's without touching too much on a subject we'll cover later on. That's kind of what I found too. So there's a lot of ties between Richard C. Christian and another group, and there was an interview that I had seen, and if Jake doesn't talk about it at all, then I'll bring it up. But it's kind of the the standing theory is that it's not something for government, a new world order style government, to look at and say, all right, this is how we're going to rule the world. This is more, in their theory, a nuclear war happened. All right, this is what we need to do. And it is kind of geared towards a one world government without being completely like fear provoking or authoritarian. I don't know if that makes sense, because like it says to guide reproduction, not control reproduction. So going back to like Roman times and such, they guided reproduction in a authoritarian way, but it was, in order to build their army, they controlled reproduction. They guided certain people together, so forth, so on. Rule with passion, faith, and tradition. All things with tempered reason. That tells me, all right, that doesn't really sound communistic or authoritarian in that aspect, just from an outside view.
No, and it's very interesting. If you look at that, you rule your faith. Okay, that's up to the individual to rule their faith. There's some people that have
Right.
extreme faith, some don't. Your passions. What are you passionate about? And all things with tempered reason. You can, people can get very passionate about things. I mean, just look what's going on in the world today,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
they're not ruling it with tempered reason.
Not at all.
They're just out there letting her fly.
Yeah.
So, it definitely seems to me that these things here, that the rule part of it isn't trying to actually control people in any way. It's just keep yourselves calm.
Sure.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I think like you said before, it definitely is well, like most things in life, right, are taken to your own personal interpretation. I mean, you could read those and just be offended and think, they want to kill us off and control us, or you can kind of read them and maybe with tempered reason read them and see like, all right, maybe it's just like a helping hand or a guide, as you will.
Yeah.
What the one I find interesting is just the one liner here: avoid petty laws and useless officials. So if there's anything contrary to a new world order type government, I think it's this one: avoid petty laws.
Yeah.
How many petty laws do we have out there right now? I mean, it's kind of ridiculous. And how many useless officials do we have?
Is all of them a fair answer?
It definitely can be. Definitely can be. I think there's a good majority of the people in this country today that would just like to get rid of all of them
Yeah.
and start over. And actually, this might
Right.
be a good list to give the ones that come back.
Yeah.
You know,
Right. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
before we move on, I do just want to touch on the 8 different languages a little bit.
Yep.
So they start off on the one stone that faces due north, and they move clockwise around the structure. And the 8 languages are English, Spanish, Swahili, Hindi, Hebrew, Arabic, Chinese in the traditional form, and Russian. But a few feet away to the west of the monument, there's an additional granite ledger that has been set level with the ground. This tablet identifies the structure, and the languages used on it list various facts about the size, weight, and astronomical features of the stones, the date it was installed, and the sponsors of the project. It also refers to a time capsule that is buried underneath the tablet, but blank spaces on the stone intend for filling in the dates on which the time capsule was buried and is to be opened and have not been inscribed. So there's a lot of uncertainty if the time capsule was actually ever put in place. The complete text of the explanatory tablet will go through below, but it's somewhat inconsistent with respect to punctuation and misspells the word pseudonym. The original spelling, punctuation, and line breaks in the text have been preserved in the transcription, which follows. The Georgia Guidestones Center Cluster erected March 22nd, 1980. Immediately below this is the outline of a square inside which is written, "Let these be guidestones to an age of reason." Ooh, I like that sound. Around the edges of the square are written translations to 4 ancient languages, one per edge. Starting at the top and proceeding clockwise, they are Babylonian cuneiform, Classical Greek, Sanskrit, and Egyptian hieroglyphs. The astronomical features listed are a channel through the stone that indicates celestial pole, a horizontal slot indicates the annual travel of the sun, a sunbeam through the capstone, which marks noontime throughout the year. And then it lists the author, R.C. Christian, which is a pseudonym. And the sponsors are listed as a small group of Americans who seek the age of reason. What it says about the time capsule, though, is that it's placed 6 feet below this point and to be opened on, and the date that it was placed are both blank, as we said earlier. As far as physical data that the explanatory tablet gives us, its overall height is 19 feet 3 inches. The total weight is 237,746 pounds. 4 major stones are 16 feet 4 inches in height, each weighing an average of 42,437 pounds. The center stone is 16 feet 4 inches high, weighs 20,957 pounds. The capstone is 9 feet 8 inches long, 6 feet 6 inches wide, 1 foot 7 inches thick, and weighs 24,832 pounds. The support stones are 7 feet 4 inches.
I just wonder, why those specific dimensions, right? So this guy, because from what I gathered is he gave him these specific dimensions in which to make these. And I mean, everything else that's been done on there, at least from what I can see, had a purpose, right? Like they did it in the 8 most popular languages in the world currently. They made them, does it have something to do with those are the dimensions they need to be in order to accurately depict, the sundial or whatever the hell's on it? I mean, I don't know.
Well,
That's very possible, actually.
I was just going to say that maybe Jay could have a clear answer with him knowing a little bit more about astrology than either you or I do.
Maybe, you know, maybe it's something to do with the geometry or whatever of how it all is, and that's kind of, I mean, that shit sounds like it's way above my pay
Well,
grade.
Well, it has a lot to do, I'm sure, with um, the astrology of it or the astronomy of it,
Okay.
because it has to be at certain heights and certain angles for you to get the proper view. Now,
Yeah, that makes sense.
and in that, you know, if we step back a little bit, you know, if there is a theory that, you know, these are instructions for after um an apocalypse type thing, you know, whether it be nuclear or whatever, um how there's not going to be any clocks. There might not even be any
Sure.
calendars left. There may be no way of you knowing. Okay, so even that, if you have someone that has the knowledge to be able to look through these holes in these stones and see where you're at in the year, you know when to plant your field.
Yeah.
You know if you have to worry about winter coming. There's so many things that, you know, we kind of take for granted now. Like, you know, we look at the calendar, we open our phone and just see what time and day and month it is.
Right.
Um, this is pretty much going back to a lot of ancient knowledge. Now, actually, what I was considering is, um, Paul, do you still have the weight on them, like the total weight?
The total weight of the structure is 237,746.
Now, see, if you use a chart, giving letters numerical value, there could be a code hidden within this, is pretty much what I'm getting at.
Okay.
You know,
Sure.
because what we're seeing here is lots of numbers. Lots of numbers can correspond to letters, and vice versa, Now, it's interesting. So you're saying the time capsule was buried 6 feet underneath it.
Yes.
Now,
That's what it says. Yeah.
that I can't really elaborate on it on the program because I'm kind of sworn to secrecy, but anybody out there that's listening that is a Freemason, 6 feet perpendicular, let's just put that out there. That might hit on some Masons out there. That'll mean something to them, put it that way.
Okay.
You know, this actually, it kind of sounds a little more Masonic than it does Rosicrucian. But on the other hand, it really could go either way, I guess.
I mean, is there a chance that, you know, the group of Americans that want to see what it is, an age of reason, is a combination of those two or more groups?
It really could very well be. I mean, to be honest,
You know,
um,
maybe there's influences from both, you know, or
because
more even, or other groups as well.
Yeah.
in studying these groups, the Rosicrucians and the Freemasons, they do have a lot of things in common. But, you know, as far as the Rosicrucians go, they are more spiritual study orientated, I guess you would say. You know, they actually dive into the esoteric part of it. They study metaphysics. They study, I guess one of their beliefs is, you know, like Jesus wasn't God incarnated into a man. He was more of a man who incarnated into a God. Okay, if that be the case, how did he do it? What were his studies? What, you know, did he just meditate for 30 years and jump on the scene? Well, you know, that's one thing that we don't get in the Bible is, like, we go from birth to 30. Okay, what happened in between? Because, you know, now that I'm like 42, I know a lot happened between birth and, you know, 30 years old. You know, there's a lot that went in there.
Yeah.
So they have a lot of good theory behind it. You know, what did he study? Where did he study? Now, if you go, you know, into a little bit of conspiracy theory about this, I don't even know if that's the right term, but, you know, say Jesus went and studied in ancient Egypt. You know, he studied their culture, their mysticism. He went and studied in Tibet and different parts of China, you know, into like Buddhist, Taoist religion. And he went into India. You know, he made a whole tour, you know, and he took those things and he learned what really makes up the fabric of this life. How to communicate with our divine creator, how to use the forces of nature. I read a really interesting fact that the Great Pyramid of Giza, okay, they say it's, a tomb, they found a sarcophagus in there, but there's nothing in it. There's more and more information coming out that place was not meant to be an actual tomb, since they never found a pharaoh in it or anybody else. But you can go into it. You can lay in that sarcophagus, and you can have the lid shut on it. Now, there's a theory that this was common practice for, mystery school initiates, is what they call them, where if you went into something like that, okay, you have to study the shape of a pyramid, the energy dynamics of a pyramid, how it resonates, sound and energy and vibration, and it gets really deep. Okay, now you place yourself into a more or less a sensory deprivation chamber in that. Okay, now you're going to be able to hear your heartbeat. You're going to hear the blood flowing through your veins. It will be so sensory deprived in there that you won't even know what to do with yourself. But to be able to stay in there, you have to have control of your mind. Everything is mind. Everything is mental. It's another Hermetic philosophy.
The more and more you went through that, the more and more, as you described it, it did sound like a separate sensory deprivation tank kind of setup. But what I found interesting is everything that you touched on with the alignment of the pyramids and how they work out astrologically. What if it was like a hyper meditation kind of location rather
exactly
than
that's it. Well, I guess in my opinion, that's exactly the point of it. You have the astronomical alignment of it, so you're getting the energy from the constellation Orion from his belt. You are sensory deprived, so you're getting that information. That's how you learn to connect with the divine. You shut your mind off. You shut all the outside stuff off, and you go into your mind. And that's where magic happens. I mean, to be honest, that's where you connect with the divine. So that's why all these things play in together, if anybody wants to study this stuff, first place to start, Hermetic philosophy, my opinion. Anyway, I digress. So anyways, back to the Rosicrucians. They have that theory that it was man incarnated into a god, how he did it. Okay, lots of meditation study, lots of deep study. As far as I can tell, the Rosicrucians are the only ones really practicing old school metaphysics, old school mystery school type teachings at the moment, put it that way. The Guidestones, okay, here's how you live, here's how you govern yourself, here's, if you don't know what time of the day it is, what time of the year it is, here's a way to tell that. And those things are very practical. They're very useful in a number of different aspects.
Well, and going back to restarting society after a natural disaster, if you have somebody who can interpret the information given in the Guidestones, it kind of gives you a reset button to get back to where you were before the natural disaster, because then they'll be able to say, all right, this is the day it is, this is the time of year it is, this is what month we're in, this is the time of day, we know exactly where we are, let's get a calendar going, It'll take us a while to get the technology to start building clocks again, but we know where we're at. Let's keep moving forward.
No, and I think that's pretty much exactly it.
Yeah, 'cause, I mean that would give grounds to be able to. I mean, obviously we all know what a calendar looks like, and anybody who could interpret the information from the Guidestones could sit down in 15 minutes and have another paper calendar made.
Yep.
And it would allow for society as a whole to be able to understand again where they're at and pick up and move forward.
And that's what I think is the beauty of it. It's an extremely useful tool,
So as far as anything that like I said, when you and I talked about it, I had only ever seen the link drawn in one place. And that was on an episode of a TV show that's now off air, but I had watched it over Christmas on YouTube. And the connection that they made was, okay, RC Christian, Rosicrucians, they're a Christian society, and they kind of linked it all together that way. And when they went and they interviewed a member of the Rosicrucians, she had basically said, yeah, no, we're going to denounce anything that suggests that this is for like population control. The conspiracy basically isn't right. And she went on to explain that her belief was that it was, like we already talked about, a guide to re-civilization after a natural disaster. And she explained more about the Rosicrucians as a society and kind of went on. It was a really, really good, informative episode. If you guys, our listeners, want to go and check it out, it was an episode of Brad Meltzer's Decoded. And like I said, I found it on YouTube over the Christmas break. And they get into it a lot more. It was, by the way, an episode on the Georgia Guidestones when you're looking for it. But they get a little bit more into, I don't know, I don't want to be misquoted here in saying this because I vaguely remember, but I believe there was something about how Rosicrucians also kind of study moving things with their mind, and they went to a hospital where they are working with robotics for amputees, where you use parts of your mind to move something, whether it be a dot or a ball or whatever inside this program. And they say that only like 30% of people can do it. And one of the guys on the episode was able to do it within the first couple tries. They said that's virtually impossible. So that was kind of cool too. Like I said, I don't remember exactly how it ties in, but that's how they made the ties to the Rosicrucians, along with some local lore that they may have had involvement in it.
Yeah, that's different.
Yeah.
I guess that's not something that you hear about every.
Yeah, it's very interesting that they did the mind control or the moving things with your mind, in that episode, because that would be part of training, Rosicrucian training. It's the controlling of the mind. There's going back to the pyramids and whatnot, there's a lot of theory that, they use some type of levitation or some type of, power of mind, controlling supernatural forces, more or less, with the mind. So it's just very interesting to me that I didn't even know till I watched that episode that, somebody was, doing active research on that. Because the last time I heard of anything possibly like that happening is with the Coral Castle down in Florida, with all the giant blocks of coral that were moved I think it was back in the 1920s. That's a whole another going to be a whole another episode right there. But
Yeah.
that guy was said to either use the power of his mind or some type of frequency to move the giant blocks of coral by himself. So another very interesting thing right there.
Well, and it goes back to even Egyptian stuff. I mean, what we speculate about the pyramids and stuff in this episode is true. There's still to this day, it is stumping scientists how they move the blocks for those pyramids. And if they were constructing those for a deeper meditation and able to control things with their mind, like we're talking about now, I mean, that could be a possible answer for how they move the blocks to construct that.
Right. If you take a good look at history, good look at architecture, that's a good one. If you've ever been to an actual cathedral, like over in Europe or wherever, or a temple, in Asia or wherever, if you look at these buildings and you stand there and you look up and you look up and you look up, and they're amazingly huge. The architecture, it's all done precisely on purpose. And the enormity, the weights of these buildings and their ceilings and their roofs and their walls, these giant chunks of, perfectly carved stone, it makes you wonder how did they do this? Oh, this was built, in 700 AD. Okay, this building's 300 feet tall. How? Oh, scaffolding and
Yeah.
slaves.
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
Do you think the
Yeah,
slaves
they
would
definitely didn't just rent some tower cranes and throw things there,
exactly? We have I'm under the belief that we have so much knowledge that has been lost in this world.
Yeah.
How do you build something like that? The pyramids, they are so precise. They are so correct. They line up with the stars. Who does
Well,
that?
I mean, in reference to what you said about how much knowledge has been lost in the world, just look at the last 30 years with how much technology has advanced, how much has been lost. I could go upstairs, get my 8-year-old right now, bring him down here, set him in front of a rotary phone, and I'd tell him, here's a phone number, dial it. There's videos of it all over the internet. Kids don't know how to use them. Kids probably couldn't even figure out a push button payphone if they didn't know that they had to put money in it.
Right?
Or, calling information. There's so much of the way that I grew up. Now, mind you, Jake and I aren't that far apart. Jake and Jamie, or Jamie and I aren't that far apart. But just in my 33 years of existence, the things that I remember, like even pre-internet, how in a matter of a couple of generations of children, in a matter of, let's say, 2 decades, how much has been lost from the way that I grew up to the way that I live now is absolutely absolutely mind-boggling.
Right. And we've lost, we've gained, things are evolving really, really fast right now, especially with technology. And, what happened? Where did those people go? Where are the architects? The people that knew all these, numbers. Architecture is a lot of numbers. And where did these people go? I think at some point in time, in the relatively recent past, I think we went through a huge reset of some sort that we don't recall. Maybe the Rosicrucians, maybe R.C. Christian was one. Maybe this group of people knows this, and that's why they gave us the Guidestones.
Yeah. Well, and on that episode of Decoded, too, I remember them talking. Where did they go? It was a site of like the 1980 Olympics or something.
Oh, yeah.
I'm reaching out to you here because I know you said you watched it too. But
That was like a week ago. I've watched probably 27 videos since then.
I was gonna say, I watched that episode too, but I think it was like 6 years ago.
yeah,
So I'm useless at this point.
yeah, because the episode date was like 2012 is when it aired.
Yeah. I might have watched it even before I moved down to the south.
Yeah,
So I mean that was 7 years ago.
yeah. But I want to say it was like Moscow Olympics or something that they built the stadium, and they were talking about the construction of the canopy of the stadium and how even that architecture that was used was more advanced than a lot of things for its time because of the way it was designed. It was actually stronger than if they would have put up anything else. And you got to watch the episode to get everything that we're touching on.
You know, that the construction of that canopy actually kind of interests me, because if you look at, you know, say in our lifetimes, like the last 30 years or whatever, you know, the Olympics are a great place to showcase new architecture, new grand things. Well, what happened to the World's Fair? Now, see, if you read history and what used to be the World's Fairs, these were the places that showcased all the new architecture and all the advancements. You know, this is the first showcase for the light bulb, you know, between Nikola Tesla and Edison. They both had displays, you know, of the electric light bulb. It is rather interesting that they would go and check something like that out.
Yeah. I'm trying to.
Do they even have the World's Fair anymore? I mean, is it even
I
like
don't believe so.
a thing?
I don't think so.
Because I mean, I'm trying to think like through what I've read for history, I don't remember hearing much about it after like the turn of the 20th century.
Yeah, I think it pretty much ended,
you know?
somewhere around World War One.
Huh.
But
I guess that's not something I really thought about until you brought it up.
yeah, it was a big thing in the late 1800s into the early 1900s, and that's one of the connected the dot things that actually just occurred to me, is that, well, the World Fair stopped, but what do we hear about? The Olympics. Oh yes, the Olympics. You know, we really started hearing about the Olympics. You know, it's not the beginning of the Olympics, but like the high point early in the Olympics was, you know, when Germany hosted the Olympics in 1930. I want to say it's 1936, 7, 8.
I think it's 1936.
Somewhere right in there, yeah, right before the war started.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that was the early high point. And, you know, thinking about it, it's like I've never heard anything about the World's Fair after that. And the Olympics,
I haven't.
The Olympics follows the same kind of MO. You know, it's in a different country every time. You know, different country, different culture, different, you know, inventions, stuff was brought there. Just like, you know, the World's Fair was. And the World's Fair attracted people like the Olympics does.
Yes. So I'm gonna interrupt here real quick, Jake. I know you said you watched this recently, so I'm falling back on you. Like I said earlier, am I losing my mind, or am I correct? I don't know if I'm crossing two different videos that I saw here, but I found the stadium in which they were talking about architecture and stuff like that. And it's the Munich Stadium that the Germans built specifically for the Olympics in 1972. And I don't know if I'm crossing that episode of Decoded with something else that I watched, but I seem to remember them talking about bubbles. I'm really thinking it was another episode, but they were talking about bubbles and how you can put bubbles together and they make different shapes. And it's always the most practical shape to maintain strength, and that's when they were talking about this. So I don't think it was that episode of Decoded.
Okay, yeah, it might have been a totally different episode.
I think it was something totally different altogether. I know what it was. Okay, I was watching something on Netflix, and they were talking about architecture, and it was on the numbers of the universe and how everything. Yes. So I'm getting way ahead because we have that down for an episode list too. So I apologize, but yeah, you brought up agriculture or architecture, and it struck that memory, and I'm like, okay, I remember something specifically about this.
Okay. Here's a little interesting tidbit. I was doing a little jotting down on paper here while we're talking, and I was doing a little bit of numerology. Okay. I'm not going to get too far into it because we'll get way off too far on a tangent. But in numerology, there are certain numbers that hold a lot of influence. 3, 6, and 9 are very important numbers when it comes to numerology. Now, it was Nikola Tesla that said, if you understand 3, 6, and 9, you hold the keys to the universe.
Yep.
Okay, so explaining those, anybody listening, go ahead, go research that.
Yeah, because isn't it? There's something with the number 9. That 9 is like the only one of all of the numbers between like 1 and 8 that isn't divisible by itself.
Yeah. That's very true. I forget. This is a whole study in itself. So double numbers, 11, 22, 33, 44, I believe up to 44. In numerology, they hold certain frequencies, certain vibrations, certain meaning. Okay. So if we took the weight of the Georgia Guidestones of 237,746 pounds, you boiled that down into a single number. You add 2 plus 3 plus 7 plus 7 plus 4 plus 6. Kind of how it works. You boil that down, you get 11. Found that very interesting. So I also did the numbers for RC Christian, because that's all we have is RC and Christian. So you end up with 33, 9, and 9. So those special numbers being the dual numbers, 3, 6, and 9, I find that very interesting. You boil that down, you get 3, a 9, and a 9. So anyways, anybody that wants to see the real meanings of these, so we don't dive into it here on the show, but if you want to see the meanings of this, go to, there's a number of different numerology websites out there that you can just Google, the meaning of 33 or meaning of 9, stuff like that. You can just Google them. There's plenty of sites out there, and you can see how interesting this numerology stuff becomes.
Yeah.
So the weight of it. Here's another thing. All right. So it was erected March 22nd, 1980 is when it was it was the unveiling date. Okay. Here's another one. March. So that's a 3. 22nd, you have a 22. 1980, you add all of them up, you get 18, 1, 8, that's a 9. So you have 3, 22, 9. You're following the same pattern of numbers. If you go to a good numerologist, it will blow your mind.
I know a lot of people hated the movie, but did you ever see the number 23?
I have not. I have not. I've been avoiding that movie because the number 23 has actually been plaguing me for I don't know, about 4 or 5 years now. I see 23s everywhere.
Yeah,
honestly, I thoroughly enjoyed the movie. I know that a lot of people didn't. It's got a lot of bad reviews. I think because a lot of people just like see it as just ridiculous, but I don't know, man. I liked it. It kind of blew my mind. Just touching on what you said. If you look into it, you'll have your mind blown. The movie did that for me, and that was only an hour and a half.
Right. I don't want to spoil the whole 23 thing for me till I figure out what it is for me personally. Why am I seeing this number 23? Because I forget what the name of it is, but there is a phenomenon out there where, and it's not really a phenomenon. I do believe in psychology. There's actually a name for it. Like if you buy a red car, you will not realize how many red cars are actually out on the road till you buy a red car. Then you see red cars everywhere. You know, if you bought, a Volkswagen, you don't think there's, I got the only one of these in the county. Then as soon as you buy one, you start watching for them subconsciously.
Yep.
So I don't want, watching that movie. I really want to watch that movie, but I don't want it to spoil it for me.
It's good, man. I enjoyed it. But yeah, I mean, I guess on that note, maybe it's a good idea that show. But maybe you're seeing 23 because you're supposed to watch the movie.
Why did I never think of that?
Well, refresh my memory, Jamie, doesn't he work out why he's seeing the number 23 everywhere in the movie?
Yeah. Yeah, he does.
So,
well, all right.
Maybe.
Okay, spoiler alert. Spoiler alert. Okay.
yeah, spoiler alert, but
okay, maybe I got to check Netflix.
I just had one last thing to kind of add about I guess the Guidestones themselves. I was doing a little bit of research as we were talking, and I found this kind of interesting article about it kind of asks the question of why the location, why Georgia, why that spot in Georgia, and it seems to be, according to this article, that there may be a reasoning behind that. So this article is from crimereads.com, and it's a pretty big in-depth article. I'm not going to get through all of it, but there is one spot that they question why Georgia, why that particular site. And so according to the theory of earth changes, first propounded by the mystic Edgar Cayce in the early 20th century, he argues that we're rapidly approaching a time of devastating changes to the surface of the earth, which, right, everybody and their brothers predicted that. So those changes could be the result of earthquakes, asteroids or comet impact, supervolcanoes, solar flares, aliens, nuclear war. I mean, and basically he says that when that happens, that it's going to change, like literally change the face of the earth, like how the actual, like everything is going to change. But in his theory, it also turns out that in addition to the changes that would alter the physical face of the world, there are safe zones in his theory also, that they're places that would ride out the earth changes, and in doing so provide a psychic focus for the energies needed to rebuild the world. Where are those safe zones? Well, one of them is in rural Georgia, literally where the Guidestones are. So I'm sure it gets more into it. I didn't get that far reading as to like why he thinks that those spots are safe zones, but I just thought that was kind of an interesting footnote, I guess.
Well, geologically, if you look at it, you're sitting on the world's largest granite deposit. Where's it going?
Yeah. Well, and not only that,
That's
but
probably pretty steady.
Not only that, but if we go back to that episode of Brad Meltzer's Decoded, they did an interview with a guy who produced a map of safe zones, and this can be found all over Google. And what the map depicts is basically how the United States would change if there was a drastic water table increase or anything like that. And the site where the Georgia Guidestones are is marked in a highland zone on that map.
Mm-hmm.
But basically,
I believe it's the highest like area in Georgia, I think, isn't it?
I'm not sure. I didn't look into that. But basically,
I thought I read that.
When you look at that map, the entire Mississippi River basin is supposed to flood. The Great Lakes are supposed to flare up and become basically one lake. And then the ocean moves inland to meet a lot of that. Parts of Louisiana, Texas, Mississippi are all gone, if not partially gone. And the guy who did this map, and when they interviewed him for that episode, it was obviously recorded previous to the Mayan prediction of the quote unquote end of the world, or their calendar's end on December 21st, 2012. And he predicted that that's what the geography of North America and Central America would look like post December 21st, 2012.
To add a little bit about that map, I've seen that number of times. First of which, I think I was 17 years old. And a friend of mine at the time, his mom was kind of a mystic or energy healer or whatever you want to call it. And she's like, here, you need this. And she gives me this map. And I'm like, what do I need this for? But it was almost that exact map that you seen on that episode, where the country is, just about cut in half. The Mississippi floods for, 100 miles each direction. And, the oceans come inland, and like the new capital ends up in Denver, which is interesting because we have military bases in Denver. We got the whole thing of the Denver airport. We got all kinds of craziness that goes along with all this. But it does seem to be, a very, very plausible thing to have happen.
So I got the map up, and according to this map, to try to iterate some of the visual aspect to our listeners, all of California, 3/4 of Oregon, and 1/4 of Washington are gone. All of Nevada is gone. 3/4 of Arizona. Arizona is split vertically at about the 3/4 mark. New Mexico is untouched. The lower quarter of Colorado is gone. The western part of Idaho is gone. Actually, half of Colorado is gone, and the lower part of Wyoming is gone. And then, like you said, Jake, the Mississippi is supposed to flood for about 100 miles in either direction. Half of Maine and New York are gone all the way down the East Coast, taking out, I'd say, probably at least 100 miles inland of land. Down to Georgia, there's a big bubble, and then it dips down, and it only leaves like a section of the Florida Panhandle. But the U.S. is basically split in two, and you have these two sides. There's a very, very small amount, basically all of Pennsylvania, West Virginia, 3/4 of Virginia, most of South Carolina is gone, but Mississippi and Tennessee, Kentucky are really the only things untouched on the East Coast. The rest of it, I mean, the UP of Michigan is gone. Green Bay, Wisconsin, Milwaukee, Wisconsin, Manitowoc, Sheboygan, all gone. Everything on that eastern end of the state. It goes to about, just guessing, it looks about 100 miles east of Madison is safe. So it's really an interesting map to look at.
Yeah, and there are a few versions of that map. The very southern UP, it's a possibility that it doesn't touch us, but most of the east end is gone. Because if you look at a map, it makes a lot of sense, because Hudson Bay up in Canada isn't geographically really that far. So if that floods south, it'll hit Lake Superior. Lake Superior will just kind of pour right over the east end of the UP into Lake Michigan and expand from there.
Yeah.
So there's a few variations to it, but that map has been circulating for quite a while. Another interesting thing about location of the Guidestones, I don't know exactly where they are or how they would fall on this map, but if you pull up a map of energetic ley lines of the world, no, these are, points that more or less connect more dots, of energy centers of the world. If you study like the chakra system of the body, the energy centers of the body, well, the planet has the same thing. And if you start drawing lines between a lot of these energy centers around the planet, you're going to end up with points of the pyramids, the Parthenon, Washington D.C., a lot of cities around the world, a lot of ancient sites, all fall right on these ley lines. The Mayan pyramids, the pyramids that they're finding in China. The ancients had such a innate knowledge of where these energy centers were. It would really surprise me if the Georgia Guidestones were not on one of these energy, points of the planet. Where these ley lines intersect is where you have, your markers. You would either have, say the Georgia Guidestones or a city or ancient sites, the pyramids, Göbekli Tepe in Turkey,
Yep.
or any of these ancient places. They were all built specifically for a specific purpose at a specific time on a specific point. The ancients had such a knowledge of these things that it's almost mind-blowing.
So I gotta interrupt you. I just pulled it up, and the location of the Guidestones falls exactly on a line right around the center at Bermuda, moving up through most of the Midwest to meet up in Canada with another focal point of this energy field.
Interesting.
They fall exactly on that line.
Okay.
So do you think people just have, I mean, maybe in today's day and age, you can Google a map of ley lines, but I mean, in your opinion, I guess, do you think back in the day, when you didn't have Google or whatever, you couldn't pull up a map on a computer, do you think these people actually had this knowledge of where these things were? Or do you think maybe they were just like subconsciously drawn to these energy lines, or maybe a little bit of both?
I would say a little bit of both.
Yeah.
Have you ever seen anybody use like divining rods, or the
Yeah.
guys that would do witching for water with the sticks?
Yep. Yep.
Same thing. There's
Sure.
ways to detect these energies. We are naturally drawn to these energies, and it's interesting if you watch how these energies shift over time. These points and these lines actually can shift over time. When you
Yeah.
see people leaving a city, when you see something catastrophic happen in a city, let's just use something in recent history. Let's take Detroit. Okay, Detroit used to be the third most populous city in the United States.
Yeah.
The energetic resonance of that city shifted. That ley line moved for whatever reason, and the population in that city fell. Well, okay, face value. Oh, well, Detroit moved all its auto manufacturing to Mexico, and there's all these economic reasons. But the thing is, behind these economic reasons, there is always some type of energetic reason. And this is a whole study in itself again. But I would have to say, before Google and before modern times and everything else, I would say it's both. I think they're subconsciously drawn to these places, and I think there are ways to, physically find these places.
Yeah. They were subconsciously drawn, and then from there drew maps, or remembered where these were, and
Yes.
Yes. Yeah, that makes sense.
Yep, exactly. It's a very interesting, I don't know, most people would call pseudoscience or whatever when you really look into this stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah. If you want to you want a good place, to build a house, buy a house. What is the energy resonance of this town or of this city, of whatever? You can, a lot of times, we're lucky enough to have something like Google. Take that with a grain of salt.
Right.
But
Yeah.
you can find these things. And if you know yourself, okay, I know my numerology, I know my astrology, I know my beliefs. You can actually plot that on a map. There's even apps out there. This is me. Where should I live? And at least
Yeah.
as far as astrology goes, you're in the energy of your name, date of birth, place of birth, your stars. What your stars say is you're going to be, good in this climate, or you're going to be better in that climate, because you have things like, okay, according to your astrology, you're susceptible to, say, allergies. Okay, you have
Mhm.
seasonal allergies horribly. Well, you're not going to want to live in a high allergen place.
Right.
So, your astrology says, you have this ailment, you shouldn't live over here. But over here on this other side, that's probably a good place for you. You're going to resonate better with this energy than that energy.
Seen.
Yeah. There's actually, I have a astrology program on my computer that will actually give that data. And I think you might be able to go on their website and actually pull that up for free. Don't quote me on it, but um, the program that I bought, I don't know, it was like $300. I spent the money on it because I wanted to know mine and my wife's astrology, uh, my kids, stuff like that. It can. I don't want to get too far off a tangent here, but it does kind of correlate because the Guidestones are astrological type marker. So you can tell a lot of things about a person when you know astrology or a place. I was just listening to a video about the astrology between President-elect Biden and President Trump, and how they differ and how their lives have played out. And it was extremely interesting. And it was actually a Rosicrucian video, and you can see how, in general, I guess, how their lives have played out, how they're going to run the country, how they did run the country. We got a little retrospect here that we can do with these people. And it's very, very accurate how things have played out. In that video is also, you take the birth date of the United States, July 4th, 1776, and you plot out a timeline from then till now and what's happened astrologically. And it lines up with all the wars and all the land purchases, and everything's laid out right on it. So the time period that we're coming into is very interesting, because we are going into, we're having a big shift right now. We're having a big change. Everybody thought it was supposed to be the end of the Mayan calendar, 2012. There's some of us that didn't really believe the whole 2012 thing, because there's a lot of evidence out there that our time, like the year that we actually live in, has been changed. Like,
Yeah.
they actually, the closest estimate that I've seen is like this year is actually 2012. 2021 is actually 2012.
I've heard that.
But
yeah.
that's,
I was gonna say, you brought that up in the episode on. You brought that up in the episode on the Mayan calendar.
Yeah.
so there is a lot of theory about that. But if you just take it for face value, the country where we're at now, we're moving into, or we're already in, depending on who you talk to, the age of Aquarius. We've moved out of Pisces into Aquarius. So that brings us a whole nother genre of things that we're going to be going through, and that we've never seen before in this country. And so far, it seems to be playing out. With everything going on today, a group of people that would spend the money to construct something like the Georgia Guidestones is well aware of these things. They would have to be. They situated those to the cardinal directions, the cardinal points, north, south, east, west. They drilled holes in them, very specific places at specific angles. It'd be interesting to see the documents that they gave, the creator, the people that actually cut the stone, drilled the stone, everything else, the instructions. They probably looked at them, and that was probably one of the reasons that the estimate was so high. They looked at them like, these guys are nuts. They want us to do what?
Yeah, I wonder if somebody has those somewhere. Like, I wonder if R.C. Christian got them back, or I wonder if like that place kept them. Or
my bet would be that they're in the archives at the place that actually cut the stones.
Yeah, that would be really interesting to take a look at.
It would, because the thought, the geometry, the calculations that had to go into, if you drilled a hole through that stone and say you're 2 to 3 degrees off, the whole thing's garbage. It doesn't make any sense. Yeah. So now you got to throw that giant piece of stone away. It's junk. Pitch it. Go cut another one. So I mean, they had to be very, very precise on their measurements. So just seeing those instructions would be entertaining to me, but I like those kind of things.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it would be.
So moving on, Jamie, why don't you give us a little bit about the interpretations? I know we mentioned doing that already, but
yeah. So we kind of touched on a lot of it already. I know it's been said a few times. A lot of the interpretation is kind of just up to the individual, right? It kind of, in my opinion, it depends on your beliefs and what you kind of the way you are as a person. If you're kind of the type of person that's sky is falling type of person, maybe you take this stuff as end of the world, new world order, what have you. But if you're kind of, maybe you're on the other end of the spectrum and you kind of take everything in stride, maybe you see these and you kind of think like, all right, if something were to happen, maybe we should go by these. There's been, there's everybody and their brother is on one side or the other on how they interpret it. Some of the, I guess I use this word lightly, but famous interpretations. Yoko Ono said that the inscribed messages are a stirring call to rational thinking. So kind of in support of them, I guess. While, you have people on the other side, Wired being one of them, which is like I believe they put on a magazine. It's kind of a, what's the word I'm looking for? Like a, boy, I'm drawing a blank here.
Tabloid?
Yes, that's the one. So Wired, being kind of like a tabloid magazine website, whatever. They labeled them as the 10 commandments of the Antichrist. And that's how a lot of, I just use the term loosely, I guess. That's how a lot of Christian organizations and people that label themselves as Christians have kind of seen these. They've kind of vilified them and claim the Guidestones are of deep satanic origin, or that R.C. Christian himself belonged to a Luciferian secret society related to the New World Order. Those are the kind of the more sky is falling type people, if you haven't caught that yet. So a lot of it's speculation, like I said, whether R.C. Christian was a Rosicrucian or he was maybe a Freemason or he was neither. And he's just had a bunch of money to blow and he's just fucking with everybody. I mean, I don't know. I wasn't there. I don't think so. I don't believe that, but it's not out of the realm of possibility, right? I mean,
him and a few buddies were sitting around smoking a joint one day. You know what we should do?
I don't know.
Good idea.
So yeah, in summation, again, it's really just kind of up to your own interpretation, and anybody can read them and interpret things one way or the other, and that's kind of why we like to talk about this kind of stuff, because I think the three of us are pretty much in agreement on how we interpret it, but sometimes it's nice to talk to somebody else that maybe thinks the other way, and maybe they'll kind of open up your mind a little bit. Because I will admit, going into this, I don't want to say that I thought that reading those that the sky was falling and that it was New World Order and stuff, but some of those I kind of leaned a little bit more that way. But then when Jake came on and kind of described how he saw it the other way, it kind of opens your eyes to things, and that's why we talk about this stuff.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, you definitely have to look at something like this from all directions. Could it still be, glass half empty kind of stuff? Yeah, it definitely could.
Sure.
But on the other hand, yeah, like you say, I think we're all in agreement on which way this goes. It just sounds like a good, if instructions were needed to start over, kind of sounds like a good place to start.
Yeah, there's a lot of good stuff in there, like not being a Cancer and, respecting the earth. And I mean, all that stuff is kind of stuff that I feel like we should try our best to strive towards, avoiding petty laws and useless officials, and, balancing personal rights with social duties. I mean, all that stuff's great, but I think people see the couple on the top, maybe the maintain humanity under 500 million and guide production wisely, and they kind of just freak the fuck out, for lack of a better term.
When I looked this up on the map, they are about 100 miles apart. But there was an 1,100-year-old Mayan site discovered in Georgia's mountains, and it's up in the Chattahoochee Oconee National Forest, and the government has actually restricted access to this site.
When
but it says,
was this that they
surprise.
Yes. So the article I'm looking at was from 2020, and I think we'll get into it here a little bit about when it was discovered. Yeah. So I'll just read through this article quick, but since we already covered the Mayans in one of our previous episodes, I thought it would be cool to add this in, especially since it could possibly tie in a little bit with, placement of the Guidestones or anything like that. Now, looking it up, seeing that it's 100 miles away, I'm less apt to believe there's any tie. But the article states there's a massive 1,100-year-old Mayan site discovered in Georgia's mountains. Historian and architect Richard Thornton believes an 1,100-year-old site shows that Mayan refugees fled Central America and ended up in northern Georgian mountains near Blairsville. His astonishing theory is based on the discovery of 300 to 500 rock terraces and mountains on the side of Brasstown Bald Mountain that date to 900 AD, or around the time that the Mayans began to die out. Mr. Thornton's blockbuster theory revolves around the area near Brasstown Bald potentially being the fabled city of Yupaha, I think it says. Yupaha, which Spanish explorer Hernando de Soto failed to find in 1540. He described it as certainly one of the most important archaeological discoveries in recent times. The Mayans died out around 900 AD for reasons still debated by scholars, although drought, overpopulation, and war are the most popular theories, reported to the Latin journal Constitution. The remains were first found by retired engineer Kerry Waldrip when he went walking in the area in the 1990s. Archaeologist Jonas Lubser excavated part of the site and wrote a report about it in 2010, but does not believe the rock terraces are Mayan. He thinks that Mr. Thornton selectively presents the evidence, but he is a better marketer than I and other archaeologists are, he admitted. They're saying that these things could have been built possibly by the Cherokee Indians too, or an earlier tribe between 8 and 1100 AD. He this Lubser stopped digging because he realized the site may be a mass grave site of some sort. But when you look at a lot of the layout of these, if they aren't Mayan, they were definitely Mayan influenced, because there's distinctive Mayan influence in it.
Mhm.
I'll just say, for lack of better terminology.
Hmm.
So it's not outside of the realm of possibilities to believe that even if it wasn't the Mayans, the migration was still possible, as they influenced whatever culture did construct this. But I basically just Google searched Mayans in Georgia and came up with a wealth of information for anybody who's listening and might want to dig into that more.
Well, that's, I find that really interesting, because there's, it was commonly thought for a while that, the Mayans actually pushed this far north, and actually formed communities up here. So them actually finding something, I guess I'm not shocked.
Well, and like I said, the episode on it that I watched, it was a whole nother YouTube video. If anybody's not grasping a theme here, I watch a lot of fucking YouTube, and I watch a lot of things on YouTube involving history, geography, archaeology, stuff like that. And for a stupid fucking truck driver, I delve into a lot of different things, you know. But
Fucking truck drivers.
but I mean, there is. I mean, there's a lot of influence in a lot of modern architecture. We're talking within the last 150 years too. It's, for me, not outside of the realm of possibilities. Obviously, if you're going through the things that they speculate ended the Mayan culture, drought, war, overpopulation, you're going to look to expand out.
Mhm.
They say that a lot of the Eskimo and Native American heritage traces back to Asia, and that the first population of US, for lack of better terms, North American people came across on the land bridge. I don't know if that theory still stands. That was something that we were taught when I was in school. But I mean, they did the same thing. They ventured out. They all throughout history. Look at what Columbus did. Look at what the Vikings did. There was always has been a history of people branching out to find new lands in order to prosper. So for me, it's not far fetched that this could be Mayan.
There's, I've seen a lot of information. I don't know how true it is or not, but I think a lot of the history that we're told and taught, I believe, is actually wrong. Um, you know, Talking with somebody that's, an archaeologist or something, you ask them, all right, what about the, say, Roman artifacts or the Viking artifacts that have been found around the Great Lakes region? This is the answer you get. This is mainstream now. This is what they're being taught in college. Well, we found some fake artifacts, so we discount all of them. And I looked at this guy. I'm like, so you say you have 10 that you found. One was a fake. You discount all of them. Yep. Oh, okay. So that's the official word. Now, if you take this is something that's pretty well swept under the rug, because mainstream, this doesn't follow the timeline that we're giving, the narrative that we're told. Okay, so in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan, there's an area called the Copper Country. It's a peninsula full of, well, copper. So copper from different regions of the planet has a very unique molecular structure. There's lots of coppers, but there's that area.
Like a fingerprint.
It's
so to speak.
exactly a fingerprint. So the copper that comes out of the copper country has been found like in ancient Persia, to make swords and, stuff like that. So, and they know that it's with this fingerprint, it's from the copper country. Well, this was 1,000 years before Christopher Columbus. How could this have happened?
Right.
So they're like, yep, never mind. We don't know. You get the blank stare, the deer in the headlights look from them when you bring something like that up. I mean, it's that simple. That
Well, and it's funny that you say that they discount it because of the fakes, because I was just probably a year ago saw an article about how they believe that the Vikings could have been here long before Christopher Columbus. And that, I mean, we're talking, what would it be, like 700 years before Columbus? If you figure they were anywhere between 5 and 800 AD and Columbus was in the 1500s. I don't think, like you said, I don't think that the history that we're being taught is wrong altogether. I think they leave out a lot of key aspects that would be found in What's that?
I think it's a lot of half truths. It's a lot of like, that's kind of how it went, but like, what about everything else that led up to that or came after it or involved in it?
That's exactly where I was going. I don't think we're being told the whole truth. I don't think
the juicy parts of the story.
Right.
Well, and it could be that they're too controversial, or it would be too hard to explain why or how. I mean, think about it. For Persians or Vikings to get to the UP of Michigan, we don't know how the land has changed since, but do you think they could just come fucking sailing in here on their ships?
Yeah, why not?
And be able to map that and find it again, and it would be, in my mind, too hard for history to try to explain without uncovering a larger truth, like we talked about earlier with the Egyptians and how advanced they were beyond us and their understanding, when generally in your general studies as a high school or middle school student, you're taught that we are far more advanced and they didn't have the capabilities to do that. Where I think it's exactly contrary, but they don't have the ability to explain it.
Do you think they don't have the ability to explain it, or it's part of a greater conspiracy to keep us, I guess, dumb?
Both.
For lack of better phrasing.
Both.
I said lack of ability to explain it as a nice way of saying it's a fucking conspiracy, and they don't want to have to tell us everything that they know.
Well, that's the thing. If they told us the real truth, that is like the granddaddy of rabbit holes. Okay. So that goes down and down. If they told us how it actually went down, you would actually, one of the things would be you'd point to who's actually controlling the world right now. Okay, so say Christopher Columbus knew, because of ancient maps, say maybe from the Romans or Vikings or whatever, that this land over here actually existed, and it had lots of spices, it had lots of more just Airfinger's quote, undiscovered land. And it had a culture of people that had a lot of gold, a lot of wealth. Well, and then there is this theory that, that Christopher Columbus was actually sent by the Vatican because the Vatican wanted the land. And they wanted the gold. So they send an explorer over here to actually find it. how did the Mayans disappear? Or, how Mayan and Aztec cultures and stuff like that, how they disappear? Well, wait a minute. If somebody shows up, one day and they're carrying disease and stuff like that, you've never seen before and your immune system hasn't seen before. And,
Right.
well, people started getting, the sniffles and dropping dead.
Smallpox blankets.
Exactly. So, I mean, history repeats itself time and time again. So I think there are a lot of very simple answers to a lot of these things,
Mhm.
and, they had, swords and all kinds of stuff. And they come over. I think they even had, muskets or their version of them in 1492, the old bust or whatever it was called, the scatter gun of the time.
Yep.
And they just take what they want. Us celebrating. Okay, this is way my opinion. I think it's ridiculous to celebrate Columbus Day because Christopher Columbus discovered a land where people already lived. That's like me going over to your
Yes.
house and saying, "This is mine now. I discovered it," and shooting you and
Yeah.
burying.
Celebrate.
Yeah, shooting you and burying in the backyard. This is mine now. I discovered
Yeah.
it. It's ridiculous if you actually think about it.
Right. Yeah, it is.
So
Absolutely.
Especially, and the thing that trips me about that, and I agree with you, is the fact that he wasn't doing anything outside of what other people from other countries were doing for hundreds of years before him. And that's kind of thing that chaps my ass. We see in mainstream media, and I hate to even bring this up because
I got the edit.
we're going down we're going down another hole here.
I'm
But
like Big
you
Brother.
see in a lot,
Careful.
yes. So and I said mainstream media, but I didn't mean mainstream media. We see in mainstream culture today a vilification of Christopher Columbus, and we see a vilification of the celebration of Columbus Day, not for the right reason in my book. So a lot of cancel culture today wants it ended because of the atrocities that happened with the Native Americans.
Yeah.
Okay, I get it. I see your point. I'm not disagreeing that that wasn't bad. So please do not take this that way.
You're already
But
getting canceled for saying Eskimo before, so I mean, you might as well just think it's offensive, dude.
watch for the Men in Black to
yes,
show up. Just watch
Yeah.
out the
yes,
window. You're done.
yes. So where I'm going with this though is we seem to lose sight of the fact, and this can apply to Columbus, this can apply to Persians, this can apply to Vikings, this can apply to anything cancel culture may try to attack. But we seem to lose it, and I mean more recently in a hotter topic, even including slavery. This happened generations before us during a time where that was an accepted thing. And for us to cancel it or celebrate it these days, to me is it's preposterous, for lack of a better term. It for us to celebrate somebody like Christopher Columbus, who discovered a land, came in, absolutely decimated its people, that would be like Norway saying, all right, we're going to have a Vikings Day and we're going to celebrate this. Any Norwegian that lives in England and has ties back to Ragnar Lothbrok. All right, we're going to say that this is Ragnar's Day because this is the day he came to England and started fucking overtaking everything. Boom. We have another holiday. How ridiculous does that sound to other people? And that's the same thing with Columbus. We're going to celebrate somebody who did something that was an accepted action of that time. Why? Why?
Because they don't tell us the true history.
Yeah, because I mean,
Okay, that was my rant.
Take that guy, Christopher Columbus, and spin what he did into being a good thing and something that had never been done before, and then use that in celebration to cover up what actually happened, right?
Yeah.
But here's my thing. We're slowly uncovering that anyway. And I mean, you want mainstream evidence of that, take the show The Curse of Oak Island. So Viking, we're denouncing the fact that Viking artifacts have been found in the United States that date back pre-Columbus. We're denouncing that, but on the same note, we have a TV show that's been going on air every season for 6 or 7 years now. 7 years, I think.
Something like that, yeah.
Yeah, something like that.
That talks about the Knights Templar who were around at the same fucking time as the Vikings coming to a small little island in fucking Canada and depositing what could possibly be the Chalice of Life.
Okay, here's where the problem comes in, or here's where it is. All right, it's all speculation. They've never found anything older than 1600.
Yes, they did.
Oh, hang on. I'm talking about disrupting the narrative. Okay.
Oh, okay.
So it's speculated that this is where the Templars' treasure is, which would actually predate, 1307. Okay.
Yes.
So the next oldest artifact they found was a Roman sword, which they found just offshore, which was discounted as fake. And I'm not really sure, but who, looking at the sword on the episode, it's like, who fakes that? Who takes the time to be like, the Romans had a really cool sword, man. Let's make some of them. Who does this?
Yeah.
Well, why is it fake? Oh, wait a minute. The date of that sword would not fit the narrative. So
Right.
it's totally discounted. So all the coins and the buttons and the trinkets and the tools that they found all date post Columbus, therefore making it plausible. So they haven't found anything Templar yet. Nothing that, okay, they found, that cross. Well, it's lead. You're not going to be able to date it. It's an ancient metal from the earth. They found out where it came from because of the fingerprint of the lead, which I believe was France.
Yeah.
Which makes a lot of sense. The Templars had a huge footprint in France. That was one of their main places of operation. But so is everybody else that lived in France. So
France was kind of a big deal back in that time.
Yeah, it was a huge deal. You had, in the late 1200s to early 1300s. I mean, and even up until today. I mean, you have two major powers in Europe. You had France and the Vatican. England too. I guess you could throw them in there too. But as far as major players of the day, you would say France and the Vatican.
Well, we definitely tangent that episode, and it was a good first episode. But oh my God, did we bounce around? We do apologize for bouncing around, but I don't feel like we left out any good information. I think that even though we did cover a lot of different shit, we covered a lot of different shit with a lot of good information.
Yeah, well, because
tied a few things
part
together.
of it is so speculative. Like we have what we know, right? Like we know what the Guidestones say, we know their size, and we know this. But I mean, we don't know the real reason other than behind what supposedly R.C. Christian told us the reasoning for the Guidestones are. So there's not a ton of information to cover. Essentially, it's just a lot of just kind of covering the theories as to why, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was finding the exact same thing when I was doing my research.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, the size, the weight, what they say, where they are, when they were there, and who made them, and that's pretty much it. What you know for fact, right?
Yeah, and a lot of that, like I said, we made a lot of really good ties So I'm not horribly disappointed in the off tracking in this episode,
No, I think
because
all of it.
a lot of what we did, yeah, a lot of what we did off track did have to play into the episode, and civilizations movements and stuff like that. Again, we want to welcome Jake. We think he's going to be a really good fit, and hopefully this episode can shed light for the viewers and listeners as to what the future will hold as far as the wealth of information that he has. I know, like I said, he's certainly impressed me a lot just in talking with him before we approached him about joining. Um, Going forward, we're hoping to bring back a lot of the video stuff and the live feed stuff that we were doing before we lost Bill. That's something we're going to have to try to work in slow, depending on how Pants's internet is. But I don't think it's outside of the realm of possibility. Things seem like they're straightening out and kind of finding a happy medium for your internet, aren't you?
Yeah, it's working itself out. I had to channel my inner Karen a few times, which I fucking hate doing. But sometimes duty calls, and I guess that's what has to happen. So
Yeah, and I want to thank you guys for considering me to be on the show, and I had a great time, so I can't wait to do our next episode.
That being said, our next episode is going to be on chemtrails. That's Jake's pick. We like I said, Jamie's pick was for the Guidestones before we were supposed to take the break, and then we ended up doing like a month-long break instead of a 2-week break. And so we let off with Jamie's pick. Jake's pick is like I said, the chemtrails. We'll see you guys next week for that, and we'll keep the episodes coming. We got a lot of really good stuff planned. So if nobody's got anything else to add, I think that's a wrap. All right, we'll see you guys next week.
stay skeptical.